We're in a series of History Alive old school videos, and we're taking a look at some of those old school core History Alive strategies that have been part of the TCI program from the very beginning. So today we're looking at the interactive student notebook, and we're going to look at options for the digital notebook or using paper notebooks. So if you're using the digital notebook, there is, of course, the option to use the built-in notebook that's inside of the TCI digital platform. And students have access to this inside their TCI platform. So here we're in the 7th grade program. If you're in one of our newer programs, they will have reading here instead of text and notebook, but it's all the same. This is our customized program, so it uses the older format. But you can see after the reading, the interactive student notebook is built right into the platform. For this task, students have a canvas that they need to annotate using text and drawings. There's a chart that they fill in online. You can type right in these boxes. And the same thing here with a map. They can annotate the map using various text box and other shapes and designs. So if you want to use the built-in student notebook, the advantage there is you don't have to do anything really other than assign the interactive student notebook to students, and it will be there to complete. The disadvantage there, of course, is that you can't really do any customization other than when you create the assignment. You could add some additional directions here. Maybe you want students to skip a particular question or do something in a different order than what's listed here. So you could provide that information when you create the assignment. But that's one option, and it's designed to be a turnkey approach so that students can go right in and do this as soon as you've made it available to them. So you can do other variations of the interactive student notebook using a Google app, for example. You might use Google Slides or Docs or even Google Drawings. And these are programs that students are familiar with. They give you a little bit more in terms of options available for you as the teacher and for students. So you could design this in a template inside of Google Slides and have spaces where students complete that. The same thing in something like Docs or Drawing. So your students are used to using that. So that's one advantage there. Of course, you have to do a little more creation and design inside of that. But especially if you're doing processing assignments, sometimes lengthy processing assignments or more creative ones are a little tougher to do inside of that built-in TCI platform. And so you may even just do a variation here where for processing assignments that are more along the lines of the creative lens, you may have them use a Google Drawing template, for example, even if they're completing the traditional TCI digital notebook inside of the platform. So those are some digital notebook options that you have available to you. But since this is old school, we're also going to talk about paper notebooks. Paperless is great, but so is paper. And there are a few different options if you want to do paper notebooks. Now, because this is one of the old school core strategies in the History Alive program, it's also available on our Bring Learning Alive interactive menu, along with all of the teaching strategies. If you go to the bottom, you'll find the guidebook here for interactive student notebooks. And this provides you with the information that you need as a teacher to help facilitate the interactive student notebook. It talks about what goes into the student notebook, why they engage students, a few examples, hints for making effective interactive student notebooks. So that is available to you if you're using the paper version, and you could probably utilize some of this in the digital version as well, especially if you're going to customize that. So let's talk a little bit more about what those paper notebooks can look like. So you have a few options. Some teachers like to use the 3-ring binder. Others like to use a spiral notebook. Now, if you're using a 3-ring binder, note that those handouts, the same way that you have them available inside of the student platform, you also have these as handouts inside of the teacher platform. So here I'm in the materials section, and I've just clicked on the interactive student notebook. So I can see here that this provides me the same thing that I have in the digital program, but now students will complete this on paper. And if you're using the 3-ring binder approach. You simply 3-hole punch these and have students put them in their 3-ring binder. We'll talk a little bit about a spiral notebook approach as well. Again, those are in the materials tab. Now you'll notice, especially in the middle school program, a lot of these are designed to be fillable. So that is, students can write right inside the graphic organizer. That will vary a little bit in some of the high school programs. They don't always provide a lot of the space to actually complete it right inside of the graphic organizer or the chart. And so students may be expected there to do a little more copying into their notebook. This is not the only place where you can get resources for the interactive student notebook. In your teacher program, under program support, if you take a look at skills and toolkits, there are, again, more PDF files here that you can utilize for the interactive student notebook. For example, I could go here to the vocabulary development strategies, and you'll see these fillable PDFs, Frayer model, illustrated dictionary, picture web, etc. And I can use these throughout the year with various lessons. Again, 3-hole punch, put these inside of the interactive student notebook. I have more on critical thinking skills that look the same way, map skills, citizenship skills, all the way down to a very extensive graphic organizer toolkit. So this can be one of your go-to resources. So in addition to simply having the interactive student notebook guide that's provided with the TCI program, you can really enhance and amplify the paper notebook by simply printing out these graphic organizers, using them for multiple lessons, and students get practice in using these graphic organizers to analyze information. So this is another great resource available to you inside of the TCI program. Now, of course, you can bring your own materials to this, but you really don't need a lot of your own materials if you're using everything that's available to you in TCI and utilizing the TCI lessons. So those same resources are available to you if you're using a spiral notebook as well, but your format might look a little bit different. So if you choose to use a spiral notebook, here are what some pages could look like. You can see that students have to write the information out by hand, and they're adding in some color, some creativity to their designs. So you can use those same handouts. You might have students simply trim them and paste them into their spiral notebooks. And again, depending on the tasks, you may want students to rewrite some of the information as well. But so those handouts do work in the spiral notebook. It just looks a little bit different than 3-hole punching and putting it in a binder. So again, you have lots of flexibility with the spiral notebook and how you want students to do the spiral notebook as well. One design feature you might consider if you're using the paper notebook is to consider a left side and right side layout. This is one of the early strategies of the interactive notebook, and you can vary this. Some teachers actually reverse them, but this is the original design. Is on the right side, you have inputs. And inputs might be things like having students write the essential question for the lesson. They might be writing out their learning intentions or success criteria. Here's where students are recording information like class notes and really any form of direct instruction. So if you have modeling and guided practice, that is, maybe you've put a graphic organizer up and you've given them some worked examples, and then students are completing this as a class. So they're really, even though the students are thinking and processing information as a class, they're recording that information as you record it as well. Things like vocabulary definitions, if you're giving them traditional dictionary definitions of particular terms, that is all belongs on the right side, on the inputs. But it's important in this notebook layout, this is what makes it the interactive student notebook, is that students are in some way processing this information. So they're doing some independent practice on the left side. This is where their TCI processing assignments can go. The synthesis and the application activities. There may be some personal reflections over on the left side as well. Here they can also elaborate on some of those key vocabulary terms. So they may be doing non-linguistic representations, or they may use these in a sentence or explain how the definition is relevant to themselves or to this particular unit. So all of that is contained on the left side, so on the outputs. Again, some teachers reverse this, and you don't have to adhere to a strict left side and right side layout. If you're using a 3-ring binder, this can be on the back side. So rather than to run pages front to back, you can simply leave back sides blank. So the left side would be the left side for the next page. Or you can do this if you're using a spiral notebook. Obviously, there may be a little pasting involved, or where students are writing in on notebook paper. So this works in either of those approaches. Also important here to consider what are going to be your notebook supplies. And this may vary a little bit depending on whether you're using the 3-ring binder approach or whether you're using the spiral notebook approach, but almost certainly you're going to want some colored pencils. That helps to add a dimension to the interactive student notebook, to add some color, to have students at minimum simply color code how they are entering information. But again, as processing assignments, you're going to want some variation of color in there. Now, if you're doing the spiral notebook, glue stick and scissors are going to be important because they're going to very frequently be cutting out those handouts and pasting them inside of their notebooks. A pencil case works well here. And if you're using the 3-ring binder, this can be hole punched and put right into the 3-ring binder. There's some other important things here too that you might want to consider, like a ruler. This may be used especially when you have designs and you need students to draw straight edges, or maybe it's a timeline where things need to have evenly spaced intervals. So having a ruler, even if it's a smaller ruler, available for students is helpful. I've also added some things like these are just plastic stencil shapes, so that when students are designing things like a Venn diagram, some students may not be entirely comfortable with freehanding circles or squares or triangles or whatever shape you need them to draw. So this just helps those students who are not real comfortable with freehanding things. It allows them to have a neat and orderly notebook, even if they aren't particularly good at freehanding. So you don't have to purchase plastic. You can also just have students cut these out of cardboard and just consider the various shapes that you might use. For example, some activities involve facial expressions or caricatures. So you could even have a cutout of a face that students can trace each time they use that in their interactive student notebook. So again, especially important if you're not simply using the handouts and students cutting and pasting, but if you're expecting them to be able to freehand and draw some of that inside the student notebook themselves. These are important to have. Now, you can have students keep these inside of their interactive student notebook. You could have them at your tables or desks in your classroom, or you could make them available to students on the whole. So those are a couple of approaches for doing interactive student notebooks. You can, of course, use any variation. Maybe you are utilizing the online textbook, but you do a paper notebook option, or you could do vice versa. Maybe you're using a printed textbook, but having students do the online notebook, or any combination thereof. There are a variety of options available to you for having students do interactive student notebooks. One of those key, old school, but still effective TCI History Alive strategies.